I'm really serious. I think that's a good idea.
Just talking? Well, what's the show about?
It's about nothing.
No story?
No, forget the story.
You gotta have a story.
Who says you gotta have a story?
Some men aren't looking for anything logical, like money. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Instead, only try to realize the truth. There is no spoon.
There is no spoon.
I'll tell you what it's worth. Not a damn thing. It's a waste of time.
Welcome to Frivolous Fandom with Mike and Kev. I'm your host, Will Shatner.
And I am Leonard Nimoy. This is my Leonard Nimoy impression.
Oh god, well, okay, Trekkies are going to want to kill us now.
Well, I was going to do a Leonard Nimoy, and then I realized I don't know what that would entail.
I can't make my voice that level.
Let's both be William Shatner.
It's so easy to characterize him.
This is so funny, and it will never get old.
Not at all. We should do the entire cast like this.
Or perhaps not.
Perhaps.
How's everybody doing?
The
Now that little...
little ditty is out of the way.
Yeah. We, in fact, are not talking at all anything about Star Trek this evening. We are going to be talking about movies.
Are we now?
We are. It's been a couple weeks, but you may remember last time on the show we talked about Twice as Nice.
You know what? I do remember, and that means that we're probably going to be talking about the inverse.
Well, sort of the inverse. We are talking about once being plenty.
Yep.
The last episode was in reference to sequels. This episode is just reference into watching movies once. Now,
And never needing to again.
Believe it or not, though, this is a sequel, but more so to a cast we did some time ago now. You may remember that we had a cast called Rewarding Repeats.
Yes, and it was rewarding.
And it was about movies that get better the second time.
Or third, or fourth, or fifth.
So this is truly the inverse of that. So we are going to be talking about movies that only need be seen one time for the full experience. And typically these are movies that when you go back to watch them the second time, you now notice every flaw and realize that there's really not much there for you beyond the initial kind of enjoyment or the initial impact that it had on you. And so it's kind of like set it and forget it, Ron Popeil status.
Yep.
You go see it, you enjoy it, and that was that.
It's kind of like that new gimmick at the Chili's. The super bazooka bubblegum shake thingy. And you're like, oh, that's new. It's cool. I want to try it.
Right.
Then you drink it and go,
I had the bacon shake.
never again.
And I enjoyed the bacon shake. And here we are.
Well, before we get to those movies, we kind of have a little more offbeat segment we're going to jump into for pre this time around.
Right. So, me and Mike, you guys may or may not know, big history fans.
Oh, yeah.
Big history fans. And so we're realizing, why don't we ever talk about... Well, we do talk about history on the cast, right?
Oh, yeah.
We talk about of the popular culture history.
Yep.
But in a more broad sense, there's so much history to work with, right? I mean, that's kind of a broad category.
I mean, humans have been around writing stuff down for history for thousands of years at this point.
Right. And
yeah.
thanks to scientists, we now know that hardly even gives us a picture of all of time. So
Yep.
That's a bummer. But like Mike said, we have thousands of years of history that we can actually go back and look at thanks to people who are, had the foresight to realize, hey, we should write this down. Somebody might find this interesting one day, or, this is going to tell a story one day. So,
Or we're like, you know what, I'm going to write what I think this should be.
yeah, that's probably more accurate. You know what? What makes me look better? That's what I'm going to try. That's the story I'm going to spread.
Yeah, the Persians had 1 million people attack Thermopylae.
Right, because fighting off a couple thousand isn't impressive, apparently, to those people.
Yeah, we're not going to just have it to where we were outnumbered 10 to 1. We're going to be outnumbered like 1,000 to 1 with more people than existed in the Persian Empire in that army.
Right. Yeah, we're going to be outnumbered to a point where most people can't even count to in that day. So, recently I've been listening to a podcast. Believe it or not, I listen to podcasts. I don't just make them. It's a podcast titled Hardcore History.
With Dan Carlin.
Yeah, it's put on by a gentleman by the name Dan Carlin, and he frequently says, "I'm not a historian." It's kind of like Super Hot Fire. I'm not a rapper, but somehow he's the greatest rapper.
I've heard him admit that he considers himself an amateur historian.
Right.
He's not gotten.
I guess he's not a
PhDs.
professional
Yeah.
historian, right? Or an academia or an academic. But clearly the guy does his research. I really enjoy his podcasts. He does his homework. He brings in lots of different sources. He cites the sources so that you could go check them out for yourself. And the one thing I do, there's two things I really like about him. He always keys in on the human element, and he always kind of like talks about like, what would the people be thinking going through this, or like the people, like what kind of a person would it take to go through with this?
We will put links, by the way, in the description to his stuff.
For sure. I'll link the podcast that kind of inspired us to talk about this stuff. The second thing he does is he kind of admits when it's his opinion on things. Like he'll frequently be like, "This is my take on it," and I appreciate that because that's how revisionist history starts, is people don't admit that it's more of a take on things than the true facts.
Oh, yeah.
And, stuff all kind of gets distorted.
Well, and he's really thorough in his background delivery.
Right.
Like, he'll spend an hour and a half making sure you understand all the angles and context.
Right.
So, if you're going to listen to these things, understand that the topic that you see on the title or the front page, if it's the first one, be ready for like an hour of background
right.
to make sure that you understand why he's going to be like, well, but this historian would have thought this, but he's also because he was here,
right.
and they were these.
He
things,
was influenced by this,
and those people killed these people, so they didn't like them, and etc.
So yeah, just know what you're getting into. It's going to be a 2 to 4 hour investment. I happen to work in a position where I get time where I'm working with my hands, so where I can listen to this stuff. So it's great. So if you're ever on a long drive or something, definitely recommend it because you're going to learn something, and he keeps it entertaining. So I've recently embarked on a 6-part series that he did.
Blueprint for Armageddon.
Yes, and it is about World War I. And so, to be honest, I skipped over it. I listened to a series he had on the Mongols and a couple other ones that he did, and then finally I'm like looking at it, and I'm like, why am I avoiding this? And initially I thought, oh, it's because it's a 6-parter. But the truth is, it's because I wasn't interested on the surface by World War I.
Nobody wants to talk about World War I.
Yeah, nobody, like World War I totally gets overshadowed by World War II. And to be honest, I think World War II, it has just more photo, like the technology progressed to where we have way more of a recording of it, for one thing. But it probably has the more iconic moments out of the two wars. And the one thing that I remember from high school and that everybody remembers is just trench warfare, right? But there's so much beyond trench warfare that they don't go into in high school and that you often don't really hear about unless you're investigating into it, that really just tells a human story that you don't even realize how, like, tragic it really is, right? I mean, it sounds boring. We're both sitting in trenches looking at each other, and it is boring, but there's almost so much more to that.
Well, like, if you ever read Hemingway, and he does talk about World War I, if you ever read Red Badge of Courage, and I can't remember.
I heard Carlin was talking about how Tolkien, too, was really influenced by World War I.
Yeah, you can almost... modern Tolkienite experts attribute World War I to the creation of Lord of the Rings. It was his version. It was his way to get out his PTSD.
Right.
And honestly, it was a very scary war. Ironically, most of the war was not trench warfare. Only in the European front did it turn into trench warfare. There were thousands of other battles elsewhere. In the jungles of Asia, in the savannas, in the deserts of Africa. It was a global war.
Right.
Interestingly enough, though, we only focus on some dude got shot, Germany got mad, and they started the war, which is a spin.
Well, ironically, Germany didn't really get mad as much as they just seized an opportunity. Like, they were kind of like the young upstarts that wanted to, basically, they thought they weren't being respected enough.
Yeah.
And they kind of used Austria-Hungary being mad, and were like, well, we're their allies, so we're just backing them up.
Well, and the problem, and what people don't realize is I think it's because World War I was way more complex.
Right. It is, yeah.
And so...
World War II, I mean, when you start to learn about Hitler, there's like there's a character.
Hitler was an evil,
There's a story
terrible
there.
human being, and he and his cronies forced the German nation to do terrible things.
Right.
And it's pretty cut and dry. We can all kind of... And here's the other thing, too. If you look at how the United States government has treated native populations in North America, just as bad. But it happened over the span of 300 years. We didn't just round up every tribe we saw and just shoot them in the head or throw them into a bunch of gas chambers.
Right.
Over the span of 10 years. You know? So it's way easier for the rest of the world to go, hey, time out, this is not okay. You know? So, and that's the other thing, too.
Hitler, you need to relax.
Well, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's very easy to say, we were good, you were bad, end of story.
Right.
You know? It's one of the few wars in history where there really are good guys and bad guys.
Right. Well, but by the way, the whole "we're good guys, you're bad guys" thing comes back to bite them. And so, one of the reasons that World War I, to me, so there's certain times in history, right, that even people who aren't history buffs enjoy learning about. To me, that's World War II. We've all seen, like, you know, Saving Private Ryan. Yep. If you're going way back, like the movie Midway or like Pearl Harbor. Mm-hmm. These are all things that you don't necessarily have to be a passionate history fan to really enjoy learning about. And World War I just isn't that, because it's thought to be boring. And it's, like you said, it's part of the complexity. It's hard to even understand why the war happened. The people fighting the war sometimes didn't even know why they were fighting. But the thing about it is World War I sets the table and is almost entirely responsible for World War II. And so you can't have World War II without World War I, and not in the obvious sense of like, well, you can't have a 2 without a 1. I'm saying if you don't have World War I, you don't have a World War, most likely, at all.
Yeah.
And the ironic thing is after World War I, they said it was the war to end all wars, and they had this big treaty where they were going to meet and set everything up, you know, through diplomacy, so that way they're not going to have another World War. And what do? They pretty much lay the foundation for the next World War. And part of it is because they're like, we're the good guys. The Central Powers, Germany, the Turks, the Austria-Hungarians, they're the bad guys, and they don't even get represented. Like, Germany didn't even have a delegate, and all those countries didn't even have a delegate in the, what do they call it? The Treaty of Versailles.
Yep.
They basically
the
get
umpteenth one, because
punished
we all
to
want
the
to go to
extreme.
Versailles for our treaties for some reason.
Right. And here's the thing. As much evil as there was with the German leadership, the millions that died were just following orders. Like, you
can't even really say that the German leadership was any more or less evil than any other group, because everybody was just trying to do a land grab.
Right.
I mean, that's what it was. It was fighting over turf.
Right.
It was fighting over... I mean, that's what it was.
The Germans were the aggressors early.
Kind of. I mean, at the end of the day, Russia was mobilizing. Right. So, and actually, that's the other thing that doesn't ever get educated, get put across to people. It's not like now we're going to send our jets, and we're going to drive our vehicles, and we're going to be there in a couple hours. But
it's like a mass herding, towards the battlefront.
You're using railroads. You're using ox carts still. You're using whatever vehicles you can, and as this giant war machine moves forward, once the gears are in motion, you can't stop it.
Right.
And so when as soon as everybody started mobilizing, you can't stop, because everybody's afraid that if I stop, and they don't, I'm going to get caught off guard. And this is for the first time, when we talk about weapons of mass destruction. Back then, a machine gun that
was a weapon of mass destruction.
Well, the machine guns that you could carry individually.
Right.
2-man groups could carry a machine gun and could pin down an entire platoon if they were fighting with muskets.
Right.
Cavalry, which had been...
Well, I mean, that's also... So that's one of the most interesting things about World War I, is that, at least at the beginning of the war, and even through most of it, the leadership and just people in general hadn't quite realized the pace of technology was increasing, and they didn't understand the role that it would play and the evolution of it. And they don't, now we understand exponential growth of technology. Like, we've been hearing this, especially now we're in the digital age, and we've seen the progress, that computers and the way they've changed our lives. It's obvious. But you gotta understand where these people are coming from. I mean, they barely even had electricity 50 or, however many years before this. And so the leadership doesn't understand the role of technology, and they end up sacrificing so many lives because, like you said, they don't understand that machine guns are a weapon of mass destruction in this time period. The artillery they had was they didn't even know what to expect with it. I mean, they had made it, but they didn't realize the power that it held. And so many lives were thrown away in this war.
Well, I'm trying to remember the figures of it, because both the French and the Prussians, specifically, because it was the Prussian wing of Germany that fielded these soldiers, but their cavalry, their hussars, had been fighting wars and dominating wars since the Napoleonic era.
Right.
And Dan Carlin says this perfectly. You want to see what a Napoleonic cuirassier looks like?
Look at World War I.
Look at World War I.
Right.
Because in the early part of the war, they were riding out there with pointy, fuzzy hats and
Right.
metal breastplates with swords.
Right.
They really thought that this would be how war would fight.
Yeah, as I say, World War I was the first war where cavalry is like virtually worthless. I mean, if you're running a horse across the field, you're gonna get mowed down or shot with an explosive shell.
Yeah.
You know, like there was no real way to mobilize, and that's what led to trench warfare, right? Is like if we dig in here, we're gonna go underground so we are safer from machine gun fire and artillery. We're gonna put up barbed wire in between us,
And then we're going to pump
And there's
lots
just-
of mustard gas and
Oh,
cyanide
man. Right.
into the air.
right? First biological weapons developed in World War I.
Well, first ones that you could control and shoot at people.
Right.
You know, people had been lobbing plague-filled bodies into
Even
cities.
though, by the way, it still depended on the wind. Like, if you were going to nerve gas the enemies, you had to, and like, so I was just thinking about that. I mean, I don't know if it's documented, but what would you think if your general launched a ton of nerve gas and then the wind shifted and blew it back
God, it'd be
at
terrible.
you?
Well, you know, that's why the gas masks were so...
And the worst part about it is you can't even run. Because if you get up to run, you're gunned down. I mean, there's just no way. There's no good way.
And that's why, honestly, this was the first war where if you were mobilized in the beginning, you probably weren't coming home.
Right.
It was that simple. You probably weren't surviving the remainder of the war.
And that's the tragedy of it is, honestly, if you were mobilized at all because these generals were so, I don't know, they refused to adapt. Again, they didn't understand that you couldn't just throw men at your problems anymore. Like, they would send in second and third waves to these battles that had been going for months and like send them across no man's land and get gunned down. Like, they thought they could, you know, if we laid down artillery, we could, you know, then have an opening to run across. Well, it's not that easy. I mean, these trenches run for miles and you know what I mean?
Well, and it's really fascinating when you think about it, because if you look at Stalingrad, Russia totally subverts that in World War II. They go, we call your bluff with bullets. We're going to soak them up with our men. You know, which I wonder sometimes if they had if they'd truly done mob style advancing tactics, actually done it, like went full blast. We have people and not ammo. Go.
Right.
How would that have worked? You know, because World War II, there were better guns.
Right.
And Stalin had no problem just sending wave after wave of people.
Right.
You know, first wave's got the gun, second's got the ammo, third might have a grenade. Just pick up the stuff that's on the ground.
Right.
I don't know. Never thought about it.
Right. Yeah, it's just, this is kind of where the term war of attrition began, which carried over into World War II. You know, when you talk about Hitler invading Russia, I mean, that's what it always turns into when you try to invade Russia.
Well, and that's the other thing, too. Like, the big difference between the militaries is that Europe really hadn't done anything on a global scale, you know, up until building up to that point since the Napoleonic era. Right. They were all kind of taking notes when the American Civil War went down.
Right.
But, you know, it's really, I mean, it's really underplayed. And part of it, too, is I think Americans definitely overplay our role.
Yeah, we do want to make that known. I'm sorry. I love America. I'm as patriotic as the next person. But we are slightly unfair to the French in terms of, like, downplaying their military prowess, and we overinflate ourselves because the thing is, by the time the Americans got involved in World War I, these countries had bled each other nearly dry. So by the time we're reinforcing with fresh bodies and the Germans aren't, I mean, there's just...
Well, and I don't know if Dan Carlin ever mentions this because I haven't finished that.
I'm on part 4 of 6, and it's like 20 hours of material.
So how I remember reading it happened was, I don't remember if it was Wilhelm or the commander of the Wehrmacht, but they went to either Versailles or Geneva, one of the two, a neutral ground,
right,
and went to what they thought was an accord. Like, okay, we're going to have a ceasefire, and we're going to start working out a peace agreement. Well, when they got there, it was the British, French, and Americans saying, we'll accept your surrender now. And the commander, or the Kaiser, I can't remember which one, was indignant because, like, I'm not surrendering. This was supposed to be
peace.
This was an agreement.
Right.
And basically the British implied, well, see, these nice old Yanks have hopped over the pond, you see, and they have at least 50 to 60,000 more people right now who can enter the battle,
right,
with 150,000 more on the way.
Right.
And then more on the way if need be. It's an entire continent, bigger than Europe, full of people that are going to come and fight for us.
Right.
And you never hear this written in a textbook before 2001. But the reason we were in the war was because we loaned money to Britain. Mm-hmm. And we weren't going to get paid back.
Right.
That's it.
Because they were using all their money to fuel the war.
Yeah, that was it in a nutshell.
Right.
And we did not want Britain to lose their colonies because that was where they got their money that they would theoretically pay us back.
Right.
Not so noble, right? Like, totally, profit-based.
Right. Well, and, the story that they tell, though, by the way, is that the Germans were trying to send a wire to the Mexican leadership because they were worried that America was going to get involved in the war. So they told the Mexicans that if they would launch a war on America, that they would fund them, and then that way the Americans would be diverted of attention, so they wouldn't cross the pond and join the Allies. But what they didn't realize was, and this shows you that the leadership didn't understand technology. They didn't understand that they used the Western Union. Well, their headquarters was in London. So they read this wire.
Most historians that I've read think that the Zimmerman telegraph was propaganda.
Well, I can believe it because this sounds fake. I mean, the Germans be this dumb because then the story goes.
That Mexico doesn't have any. The Mexico couldn't. I mean, after the
couldn't
war,
wire anybody or receive wires.
How Mexico got its butt whooped by us, by our cavalry division, not even our full army in the Mexican-American War.
Right.
But
I'm just like, it's funny because that's how the story goes that I've heard from a couple different sources, and then so basically the story goes the London office just sends it to the White House, and they're like, all right, by the way, it's on Germany if you're going to play like that.
Well, and additionally too, the sinking of the Lusitania also triggered wartime.
There's a civilian ship by the way, this is the first war where submarines get used, and the Germans use them, and in this point in time, there's no radar, so they're even more deadly.
Oh, yeah.
So they sank a civilian ship, and it was a British ship, but it happened to have 128 Americans.
And a bunch of war supplies going to... it's one of those things where it's like, it all just worked out really well for Washington.
Right. It makes us look like we're totally justified. Yeah. So.
And, Germany's like, no. We know you were running weapons. That makes it a legitimate target.
Right.
And the Americans are like, nuh-uh. And then we went to war. So, yeah.
So, I mean, just to wrap this all up, I encourage you guys, just do a little research, just learn about World War I. I guarantee you're going to be more fascinated than you would have initially anticipated. If nothing else, look at just the human element of it, because this war, in my opinion, I probably rate it worse than World War II in terms of, at least on the Western Front, in terms of the condition it put the soldiers in, because this is the first war that didn't end. I mean, in past wars, you have your big battle, and then you regroup before the next battle. No, in this one, you're leaving your soldiers in there, in the trenches, for months at a time, and it's just a ticking clock. I mean, you're going to die at some point. And so, go look up pictures of World War I. You can see pictures of guys sitting in the trench, and the bodies are just stacked, and they're literally built into the walls or just buried shallowly under the ground, because they can't dispose of the bodies, because if you get up out of the trench to throw out the bodies, you are under artillery fire. It's just stuff you can't even imagine, and it's something that you should appreciate. Being thankful for the era that we live in. Yeah. At least at this point, there's no war on this scale, and there, hopefully there never will be again. But it'll make you appreciate where you are in life and
sadly,
in time.
Any war between superpowers now infantry is not going to matter.
It's all robot. It's going to be all drones,
planes, and bombs.
Right.
But yeah.
The next war to be fought will be like civil. It'll just be 100% civilian casualties, and assuming it's not nuclear.
Which, I mean, let's be honest, it depends. Putin's not known for being very sane.
Right.
But yeah, my encouragement is, learn real history. And I don't know why, and I'm sure this is the same way everywhere you go. It's not just us, it's all people. We hear the narrative.
Revisionists.
Literally, we hear the pitch.
Right.
Because, hey, go America. And
right.
To be fair, go America.
Well, I don't know if Carlin says, but I mean, the winners get to write the history.
Oh yeah. You know what? The key though is to learn the facts and then analyze everyone else's narrative, and that's why I really like Carlin, because he says,
he'll give you literally this is the German narrative, this is the British narrative, because honestly, the answer lies somewhere in between, most likely.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things that I really enjoyed, he's talking about he was reciting British stories about German like German heroism, because these soldiers started feeling sympathy for one another, because like everyone realizes, like, we don't even know what we're fighting for. Like, if it was up to us, we wouldn't be fighting. And you start to realize, like, that's a person across the way. I mean, I know it's German and I'm a Frenchman, whatever, but it's a person across the way. And so he recounts stories from both sides of them kind of like admitting the admiration they had for the other side, which is just something you don't always hear. It's like like you were saying before, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. Boom, that's it.
That's it. Well, and there's a very, we'll wrap it up with, there's a very famous story of a British infantryman going off on an American doughboy who was criticizing the German fighters for their heroism or cowardice. And the Brit basically said, if it was just you Yanks versus these Germans, you would lose.
Right.
Just so we're clear.
The irony of everything is that there's a lot to admire about the Germans, honestly, except, for the part where they're trying to conquer everybody and have this seemingly bloodthirst. But I mean,
well, and that's kind of where, again, it's troublesome, because officially the Austrians said, we're not going to annex Serbia, but you need to submit to all of these reparations. So I mean, at the end of the day, it's just like, hey, and Bismarck called it. It's going to be some damned conflict in the Balkans. But yeah,
So, there you have it. There's our history pitch. Probably took up half the cast. We apologize.
Definitely took half the cast.
To be honest, I knew we were going past time, but I enjoy it, and I think it's the most interesting thing going on right now on this cast.
Yep.
So, but not to undersell our topic. So let's get into it, Mike. Let's talk about Once is Plenty's. Movies that you do not need to see more than once. And that's not to say these are bad movies. In fact, I like pretty much all the movies on this list. I think they're well made. They just are going for something different in most cases than, we are looking for in, say, our classics or certain things like that. And this is going to be highly debatable, by the way.
Totally subjective.
Totally subjective. If you disagree, I'm not going to argue. Whatever.
You know what? Let us know.
Let us know. Yeah, because, I mean, I'm willing to hear any argument for anything, on either side of this.
Except for anything by M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah, but he's not on this list, because most of his movies aren't even good the first time. So, here we go. Let's just start this off, Mike, by saying, what do we think this is a product of? We were kind of looking at, there's a trend, I think, with most movies to be one-hit wonders, in the idea of, you go to theater, you enjoy it, so it's you never are, depressed that you wasted your money, but you never think about them again most of the time, right? And that plays into the movies being an escape. I mean...
Well, you know what? At this point, let's be honest. If you really want a movie, you don't have to pay for it. You can download it.
Right.
So, what a lot of film offices and production companies have geared towards is, we're going to make it so that you really, really going to want to watch this in theaters. You have to pay for it.
Right.
You're going to watch it. And then we're going to make all our money.
More often than not, that means visuals. So people that complain about, this is nothing but effects. Well, understand what is really going to get you motivated to, I have to see it on a big screen. Visual effects. Yeah. And so at the bottom line, and it's usually not cheap to do this stuff. So the bottom line becomes for these companies,
make more money than we paid for it.
Right. Which, we want to get all upset and blah, blah, blah. And obviously there is some conspiracies to all this, but at the end of the day, most of us have never invested millions of dollars into a movie, which at the end of the day doesn't matter. I mean, if a movie doesn't get made, the world's not going to end.
Exactly.
Right? It's not feeding you.
Well, you know what? Matthew McConaughey put it
best.
I had to make all those rom-coms so that I could do Dallas Buyers Club and Interstellar.
Right.
And all these other roles that he's been experimental,
right,
putting his neck out.
Right.
Being like, hey, look at me.
Right. I mean, let's be honest. The true artist doesn't really exist, or generally doesn't make it. Nobody does it just for the love of the art. You got to put food on the table at some point.
Not very many people get to be Leonardo DiCaprio, where every role he gets to do has been pretty much just like, I'm going to be an artist.
Right.
But
even Titanic, I guess some people would argue is art.
He's trying. He's really trying in that movie.
Right.
Like, he's really trying to act nicely.
Right. Obviously, there's exceptions to every rule. But basically, what happens is when you're just trying to make more money than you invested, you have to appeal to the mass audience. You just do. And so you play things a little bit safer. You're going for things that... Because so many times, you walk out of a movie and you're like, there's nothing wrong with the ending. I mean, it
just
gave us
have
the
no
happy ending we
intention
want.
to ever go back.
Yeah, I don't need to ever revisit that, right? But at the same time, if it was a well-made movie, it had some humor in there maybe, it had some effects that kind of were fascinating to look at.
You know, if it's like an ogre and
You're
it's
not-
got layers, layers like an onion.
Yes.
Like an onion.
Well, these generally don't have layers, these movies. But you walk out of it and you're not going to go bashing the movie to most people.
Uh-uh.
You just might not even talk about it a lot of times. Like, oh, you saw that? Yeah, I saw that.
You know, I just say it's like, was it good? Yeah.
It was worth my $8 in 2 hours. You know, that's not that's probably best case scenario for most of these movies.
Yep.
So it's just the way it is. It's not to say any of these are not bad movies. In fact, all of these are good movies. So just take it as it is.
Yep.
So the first one we're going to talk about, and this one, I mean, it's in the title.
Honestly, this one lampshades itself really well. It's Expendables. It's genre savvy. It's intent. I mean, it's so meta about it too. It's like, this is stupid, fun, explodey action with over the top 80s corny dialogue with a bunch of has-beens and like new action people
Right.
melded together. And it's just it's a big hoot and fun thing. You get to watch things explode. You get to make Chuck Norris jokes. And then you call it a day.
Right.
That's it.
I mean, like, our friend Nick put it the best. He's just like, it gave me everything I wanted. And it did. Nobody went into that movie like, oh, I want this to change my life. No, you went in that movie wanting to revel in the nostalgia of your favorite 80s action heroes that are too old and look kind of corny doing these stunts, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the big thing usually with most classics is it gives you something you didn't know you want. And that's what blows your mind, right? You're like, man, I couldn't even fathom where that was going to take me before. This opened my eyes in this new way. Some movies, that's not what you go to see them for.
Yeah.
Expendables, you didn't go to have your mind blown.
No, you went to have your face melted, and there's a big difference. You know,
Right.
It's numbing. It's not necessarily. It's like when you're binging on junk food and soda.
Right.
You don't feel great afterwards, but as long as
it
you
felt good.
yeah, as long as you don't go overboard, you're not going to feel too bad after.
Right. And so this is one of the few movies I would say that does subvert it. Some of these movies I think were shooting higher and just didn't reach it. We'll go into it as we approach each of them. But I mean,
there is kind of a threshold for taking yourself seriously for these. If you really do try to take yourself seriously and you miss,
right.
I think that's when we go down the this is not a good movie territory.
Right.
Versus,
I mean, so Expendables subverts it intentionally. So it's kind of an odd one to start with, but it's weird because it subverts it yet embodies what we're talking about so well.
It's played for laughs. Like,
right.
They're like, yeah, we're corny.
Like, if anybody walked out of Expendables and complained, clearly you didn't understand what you were getting into from the start.
Yeah,
that's your fault that was your misunderstanding. Because that movie was clearly marketed to be what it was.
A guy poked his head out after the time I watched the first one way back in the day, and he's like, that wasn't realistic at all. Like, you don't say.
Right. I mean, the movie trailer spent more time flashing the names of the famous people that was in it than showing you anything that happened in the movie. Clearly, you're going on nostalgia factor.
Yeah.
So, and if you don't enjoy 80s action movies, if Sylvester Stallone isn't your jams,
watch them.
You're right. Don't go see it. If you don't love Transporter 7, you're probably not gonna like Expendables. So
are we really on 7? Oh my god.
I don't know. Probably. If you combine, he has like 2 or 3 franchises now that are all like into.
Hey man,
sequelitis
Jason
big
Statham,
time.
keep making money.
You're right.
If
right.
we keep paying for it. Keep doing it.
That dude's printing money. Really, we're all just jealous of Jason Statham.
Yeah.
So let's talk about our next movie on our list, Mike.
Gravity.
So this one goes back and forth with a lot of people, but I think we're in the majority in saying Gravity, amazing first experience, kind of shallow the more you think about it.
Yeah, just because, and granted, this is not really a knock on Sandra Bullock. She does what she can with a very limited script, but the whole thing is, oh my god, I'm out in space. Oh my god, I'm gonna die. Okay, I gotta do this thing, and I gotta do this really crazy jump scare, and a floaty scare,
right.
and crashy scare, and we're done.
Right.
At the end of the day, that's it.
There's nothing else to ponder. I mean,
yeah,
the only thing you ponder is, gee, that space is scary, which is cool, but I mean, it's treaded.
I mean, the only deep plot point I could picture someone asking is, was she hallucinating, or did she really hear George Clooney's ghost? Like, which is it?
Yeah.
Because that's the only question I had leaving out. I'm like, was she tripping? Was it a lack of oxygen? Like,
Right.
what's going on?
Well, and the problem with Gravity is the howling scene. The reason I would probably never watch that movie again is she's going, "Ho!" to like these wolves that she's somehow picking up a radio signal from for some reason. And it's just like, it's just like, is it odd that I want the next satellite shrapnel to rip straight through the ship so I don't have to listen to that howling for another second? I mean, they take it on for multiple seconds.
Oh, they just keep going. Oh, God.
So that's a nitpick, I'll admit. But
hey, you know what? It can't be worse than the disco.
Right.
From Astronaut, or from The Martian.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, we should have talked about The Martian, probably. The thing about Gravity is it delivered on what you thought it would be, though. I mean, it was supposed to be visually stunning. It was.
Did we see it in IMAX?
Well, we saw it in
like
pseudo IMAX.
Like the kind of, they call it an IMAX, but it's not
everyone.
really IMAX.
I mean, maybe it's different. I'm sure not every AMC is the same, but so far, when I've gone to AMC IMAX, and I did some research into this to find out that there are different sizes of IMAX. AMC is pseudo IMAX. It is pretty much a larger screen, like a semi-larger screen than normal. But if you're sitting towards the top, which we were,
it's the same.
It honestly wasn't that much different than standard.
If you're gonna go IMAX, go all the way and go to Arizona Mills.
Well, if you're living in Arizona.
Sorry, if you're an AZ like us.
Anywhere else.
No, if you live in China, you need to come here to Arizona Mills.
Arizona Mills is the only good IMAX.
Only IMAX.
It's the best IMAX around for our money.
Yeah.
But yeah, just do your research and make sure. I mean,
find out a big one.
And here's the key. Here's how you know true IMAX. It's tall.
Like,
it's massively tall. It looks disproportionately tall because you're used to widescreen. But the thing is, it's wider than normal screens. But it's the height that really makes the difference. If you don't have to
crank your neck a little bit to get the whole picture, it's probably not
right.
a big IMAX. Then.
Right. And if it's not blowing your ears off loud, it's probably not IMAX either. That is part of the IMAX. I know that has nothing to do with the size of the film, but most of the major IMAXs I've been to, they blare that
oh,
bad
God,
boy.
Inception.
Most people hate that. We love that. You know, apparently it works because Hans Zimmer makes every song for every movie ever made now.
But for that track, he just went, I'm going to turn it up a little bit.
Right. I mean, but with Gravity, even if you're not nitpicking on like a science nerd scale of like, that wouldn't happen that way. I think even like the most layman would watch that movie and be like, that wouldn't happen that way.
Yeah. You're like, you know.
And again, when the movie is on the big screen, the effects are worth it. Like, that's not going to bother you. And, I mean, I haven't watched it again, so.
Yeah.
The show's what we're talking about, so I can't speak for sure, but I just get the feeling watching it on a normal TV, it's not going to have that same effect.
And you know what? That's a perfect segue to our next movie. Because, I don't know about you, and I know it broke a ton of records, but for me, I just don't need to see Avatar again.
Right.
You know, it's just kind of...
I saw Avatar twice, so I guess I'm breaking our whole argument here.
You son of a
But it's only because I want to see it again in 3D. I saw it once normally, and I was like, I want to see that in 3D. So I went and saw it in 3D. I haven't watched it since, and that was 6 years ago. And so, it's just... There's not much to it beyond, like, there's not a story, and it doesn't really make you question things.
I don't know who said this first, but it's Pocahontas, but you switch the Native Americans for aliens.
Right.
And you throw in
well,
some
you
robots.
make them Native American aliens. I mean, it's like, clearly you knew what they were basing those aliens off of. I mean, yeah, it doesn't make you ponder any new territory that past movies haven't, past stories haven't. Man is bad to the environment, like... What are we willing to do just to profit?
Yeah.
You know, same old questions. Is it right to kill off all the people that are native to a land just because you can?
Yeah, it's very...
It's Pocahontas again.
I mean, and granted, I think part of it is that James Cameron has this inherent loftiness about him whenever he tries to make stuff, and he went on and on about how this was his magnum opus, and this is going to be groundbreaking and revolutionary, and apparently he wants to make a sequel.
Right.
And it's like, really? What is there? I mean...
What is there left to explore?
I mean, it looked great. And that's what everybody's talking about. It looked great. I mean, I don't know. It's... He gets so much credit for being a substance director, but between you and me, I mean, what are the two most famous things he's known for at this point? Titanic and Avatar.
Right.
Both movies that are probably a little more about style than substance.
Right.
Or scope, rather.
Right.
You know?
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, it took a long time to travel across the Atlantic back in the day, so maybe there was plenty of time to realize that you found your soulmate and fall in love. To me, it's probably puppy love. Just saying.
Well, and the other thing, let's be honest, let's pretend for a moment that the snob bodyguards up in the upper class stairs are going to let the street rat walker. No, that's not gonna happen.
Right.
You're going to go back down to the bowels of the pit with the rest of the dirty Irishmen. And you're going to
Right.
stay there. That's exactly what they would have said to him.
Right. Again.
Dirty papist.
And, like, how many people confuse Titanic, the movie, for real history, also? I mean, I don't know. I guess the depiction of the iceberg crash was semi... They have pictures of the ship going vertical. I don't know. Maybe that was...
Well, I mean, they had eyewitnesses. I mean,
I think the captain went down the ship.
honestly,
so.
I think Titanic... I mean, if there weren't so many darn girls out there who love Titanic
Right.
and make us keep watching it over and over again, I would have Titanic on this list.
I don't know if I've ever, like...
But you know what? For our
watched that
generation...
movie more than once all the way through.
Exactly. Find anybody our age who actually sat through the whole damn thing.
Yeah, right.
Probably few
It's
people.
like 30 and up, like 80s babies.
Yeah.
Like the girls that were like 15, 16, 17, 18 when they came out. And the moms, I guess.
I'm going to stop because I'm going to break everyone's eardrums. But yeah,
Wherever you are.
that's Kev's mic impression. Everybody.
Celine, what range you have? Yeah, it's just... By the way, it's because the only historical accurate thing in that movie was the ship crashing, and the movie's 3.5 hours.
Well,
You know,
and
they fleshed that out way too long.
them locking the poor Irish people
You don't need
into their cells when the ship
Yeah.
sunk because some jackass was like, "Hey, we don't need lifeboats."
Oh, I thought you were about to say, we don't need Irish.
Well, I mean, the Brits thought that they would never say that. That's just unchristian.
Right. Blimey. We don't need these English, or British, or Irish. What are we talking about again?
I mean, they do sweep my chimneys, don't they?
We need their potatoes, that's it.
I apologize to any UK citizens who are hearing us right now. If you are,
I don't. My accent's spot on. I'll never apologize for it. I've never stereotyped anybody in my life.
nope.
So yeah, Avatar. I mean, if they re-release it in the big screen, I won't go see it. Actually, let's be honest. And the thing is,
I'll say this:
It has an interesting history.
If they can make it hologram, I'll go see it again. Like,
Yeah,
if I can
right.
be in Pandora,
Right, if I can be
great.
living it,
You
right.
know.
If I can be an Avatar.
See, no, I have a feeling that I'm going to be the unlucky guy who steps on the thing that'll rip off your leg, and I'll be like, no, oh my god, ow, yeah, pretty much. Like, you're taking this awfully well. Well, I get to go back in my other body, right? Right?
I paid $15. I better be able to go back in my own body. No, I don't even know. Hologram movies, those are gonna be expensive. IMAXs are $15.
It's probably going to be like $20.
Oh man,
It's just out of our
who could
price
afford
range.
$20 whole to live inside the movie? But the thing about Avatar is, like, public conscious on this movie really turned quick. I mean, everyone loved this movie in theaters, and then to prove what we said, who talks about this movie now? Other than to reference the money it made in terms of, like, if you're talking about the history of
Well, that
the
to
box
make
office.
like kinky jokes about how those animals have intercourse by like touching
by
tails.
like hair, like apparently braiding your hair into each other is like sex.
I just
in that
want to know
culture.
how an animal evolves to transmit gametes via nerves. I feel like that's a little weird.
I think it's a little weird that you're thinking this hard about this.
I'm a biology
you've
major.
Seen
I'm
the
sorry.
movie once, Mike.
I'm
yet
sorry.
You thought so deep down into the gametes.
Well, no,
in
I
this
just
universe.
thought about that because the only thing I can remember people saying were making fun of that like joke.
Mike, the sad thing is you've already thought about that universe more than James Cameron has. I'm just kidding. It was hard work to make. I know.
Yeah, he had to watch Pocahontas a bunch of times and
Ferngully and like combine do this.
and he's like, you know, maybe I should make them blue and like 20 feet tall. That'll be different.
And then nobody will ever notice. It's funny how what's her name? Zoe Saldana's a different color in every movie apparently now. Some of them she's
She needs to be
delightful caramel.
She needs
Some
to
of
be-
them she's green.
She needs to be She-Hulk in something now.
Oh man. Well, no, that'd be the same color.
Red? I'm sorry, she needs to be like evil She-Hulk.
Okay. I would say she could be Hellgirl if, you know, they've That's like the one hero they've never gender bended.
Well, yeah, because Hellgirl's gonna be butch as hell.
She's gonna have huge button chops still, you know? Like, she's gonna be rocking the chops.
Which they're not to the point where a bearded woman is normal. I'm sorry, we're not there yet.
Fun fact, because would you say that the coat Hellboy wears is a trench coat?
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody know where the term trench coat came from? And when I learned this, it blew my mind because I'm like, how did I never put this together?
World
War One. It was a very versatile coat that would help keep you dry and could hold lots of ammunition and grenades and things.
What a coincidence is what it does now too.
In the trenches. Yeah, right. Yeah, usually you, apparently if you believe movies, usually have a bunch of either dynamite if the movie's crude, like Tommy Boy when he like strapped all the explosives to him, or C4 or something. You usually have explosives strapped to you.
Or like dozens of shotguns.
And you're usually making demands. I don't know. Those two seem to, for some reason, go hand in hand. So let's move on, Mike. This next movie, again, another interesting one where unless you were like 14, which we were when this movie came out.
Pretty much.
You probably don't defend this movie. 300.
Well, God knows that we were
I'm a
chanting
hater. I would say anything by Zack Snyder, but I know he has loyal followers. And
I mean, his Superman's the one I like the best.
I do, but like all Zack Snyder movies, it falls apart at the end.
Yeah.
And, you know, this might be my Nolan fanboyness, but to me it was like, because Nolan was an executive producer on that, to me, he worked with Nolan and was like, what would make an interesting Superman story? Well, let's look at the human side of Superman. Like, in the beginning of that movie, it's really interesting because you're seeing his relationship with his parents and blah, blah, blah. And it was kind of interesting that you got to see Krypton and see Kal-El, or what was his father's name? Jor-El? Jor-El and that whole thing. And then it was kind of like, all right, the story's there. Now, Zack Snyder, do your effects thing. And then the whole second half of that movie is like 30 minutes longer than it needs to be.
Well, the other problem, too, is they tried to bite off more than they could chew. They combined two movies where it should have been focusing on one aspect.
Right.
Like, when you go... when you go balls deep into Zod, man, you have to bring all the baggage that comes with Zod.
Right.
And...
The problem is they probably got like 2/3 of the way through that movie and were like, oh my god, did we just make Superman Returns again the most boring Superman movie ever? Even though I don't agree with that. I didn't find the first half boring at all. And so they're like, we can't do that action.
The problem with Superman I'm going to stop there because I can go on a 5-minute tirade of all the problems with Superman Returns.
It's just like, it was like the overcompensation, I think. It's like, Superman Returns, this is what was wrong with it? Well, not enough action? Well, here you go. Here's what you want.
You can't make a sequel to a movie that happened before most of its audience was born.
Right.
Like...
Right, and that's why it's like, it was like, Superman Returns is like slow with no emotional impact, because you don't even care about, like, you don't know much about the history of those movies, unless, like you're saying, unless you're our parents' age. But, like, Man of Steel, you can be anybody. I mean, it's a fresh story. Anybody watching that is going to be learning all they need to know about that movie.
And I still stand by it being the best origin story Superman has ever had on the big screen.
Yeah.
It's the most believable. I didn't vomit. My bio brain didn't vomit.
Right. The only thing I vomit on was like, the S means hope.
Yeah, that was retarded.
I mean, I don't know who's responsible. If that was...
See, I would have liked...
Goyer, or if that was...
It would have been nice if, like, it was... First, it was a more weird symbol. And she's like, what does that mean? He goes, it means hope. And her going, you should just make that an S.
Right, right. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, right. Their symbol for hope happens to be an S, and his name is... it's just it's a contrivance that could only happen in a movie. Yeah. Takes you out of it a little bit. We're complaining about Superman.
We should get back to 300 probably.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I mean, to be fair, there isn't much to say. It's testosterone, male fantasy bullshit.
You're right.
Pardon my French. And
it wants to be like a historical piece, but it's really not.
Well, ironically, it's actually not too far off from what some of the depictions of wars back then are given to by Hippocrates and Herodotus or Pliny or all the other, well-known historians back then. And literally, Herodotus says 1 million Persians descended upon the few thousand Greeks there. He doesn't make it sound like there were only 300
really,
Spartans.
Herodotus, did you count them?
Yeah. Well, it's just because, it's a Greek saying, we conquered millions.
Did you ask the Persians, hey, how many you got?
Yeah.
It's just full number. 1 million. That sounds like an imposing amount.
It's a ton.
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, it had a big hype train. It was awesome to behold the first time. I know everybody came out
right, it blew your pants off.
But then you realize,
See, this is one that's funny because I think everyone watched this twice
Well, it's
and
also
said, I wish I had watched that once.
It's also parody fodder. That's
Right.
why.
That's true. But
You know?
I just think when you it's a movie, because I have watched this one more than once, when you watch it the second time, you're like, it's like ruining things that you could overlook the first time.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, oh, I wish I didn't watch that again, so everything that was beautiful about it remained untampered in my brain. You know?
Well, and that's the other thing, too. You start to really, like, you go, wait a minute, did we have to do that?
Right.
Over and over and over again, you know? But let's be honest, it's a very... It's way style over substance. It's almost style to the point where the style becomes the substance.
Right.
You know? Which is typical.
This
which
is
is
a movie
typical.
some people are going to swear by because, you know, if you really like the choreography, to me, you can only do the slow-mo to fast-mo thing so much in one movie.
We've covered
We talked
that.
about this.
Yes,
yeah.
we did.
We have a cast. Fake fictitious fighting follies. I don't think we talked about 300 in it much.
Actually, I did bring it up.
We probably brought it up.
The one time where slow-mo was really good was when he's fighting the giant immortal that they unchain. And it accentuates movements that would be too quick otherwise.
Right.
And we've already,
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, we kind of broke it with that one. I've seen it more than once, but by seeing it more than once, I realized once
okay, I want to do a preface.
enough.
If you happen upon this movie on FX, that's different. And there's nothing else to do in the day,
Right.
that's different.
Right.
Because that explains any second watching of Expendables 300, Gravity, Avatar,
Any of
or
these,
any
right.
of these pretty much.
Like, they're all good enough, to watch in passing. Like, you didn't go out of your way.
I didn't go to Blockbuster. Oh my god, I
You
feel
don't,
old.
like, shake somebody, though, by their noggin and be like, you haven't seen Avatar! You know,
Yeah.
like, you're like, oh, that's, I don't know, where were you in 2009? You know, that's what you say.
I'd literally probably say don't bother until it comes back onto the big screen.
The thing with Gravity is, like, I would say it revitalized space movies, except I feel like these space movies are huge undertakings, so you know Interstellar was already in the works. Martian was probably already getting close. I don't know how long the Martian took, actually.
See, I don't know. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's some, that dealt with it. But I don't know.
dealt with what?
Space.
Oh.
Because I do remember...
Well, I mean, Apollo 13, but I guess I'm saying in this decade.
Yeah. Or, if anything, they're probably lower budget, not big blockbusters.
Right.
But, anyways.
Right.
Speaking of space... Ironically, we're segueing pretty well to this one.
Right.
Independence Day. Which,
Now,
I mean, I love...
Here's all I gotta say. If I can't run this app without downloading iOS 5 or whatever, the new iOS, ain't no way 1990s humanity is gonna be able to upload a compatible virus on alien software.
Oh, God, no.
And you know what? That's been said before. You don't need me to sit here and badger you with that. But it's all that needs to be said.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty much it.
The first time you watch a movie, especially if you watched it when it came out, blows your mind with the effects.
Oh, yeah.
They're decent to this day, but they're not they're no longer mind blowing. You get to watch the White House, the Empire State blow up. I mean, that's fun. It's one of those things where when you watch it again, you realize that Will Smith was brought in to scream catchphrases and be the Fresh Prince.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just kind of...
I mean, it's really before his movie career kind of diversified, and like you said, these actors make their money, understandably, and then you're like, you know what, I'm an artist, and spread their wings.
Well, let's be careful, because I hope that After Earth isn't included.
Well, I haven't seen it, but I've heard he's hardly in it, so... And, like, nobody's arguing Will Smith's not a great actor, maybe he's not your cup of tea, because maybe his comedy stuff got wore on you, I don't know, but...
He's got depth at this point.
Right.
Well, you can't really... I mean, he's been Muhammad Ali, he's going to be the surgeon that figured out the concussion syndrome issue. That's
interesting to me, only because I've had so many concussions from football.
Yeah.
So,
hey, I get this reaction every time I say wrestling is safer than football. People go, BS. I go, here's the deal. I have a messed up shoulder from wrestling. That is true. I'm not going to have head problems later because of it.
Right.
I know how many people on our football team who had traumatic head injuries.
I'd like to know the figures. I bet you 1 in 4 though people
with
concussions that play football.
I mean, one friend who shall not be named, and you know who I'm going to talk about, has had so many concussions they should probably do a study on him.
Yeah,
because if you count all the ones he's had in Pop Warner,
he's got a long history. His brain has some craters on it. Let's just say that.
If you ever saw him walking out the field with a big old grin on his face, you're like, oh, it happened again, didn't it?
Which, by the way, I haven't done enough research into it. Hopefully that movie will go into this, but from what I've heard is when you get a concussion, your brain swells, and when it recedes, it leaves a little pocket. A very tiny pocket, depends on the severity, but that never heals, and that pocket always remains. And so it becomes slightly easier for your brain to slide and slam against your skull again the next time. And so by the time you're like me, I have many pockets on my brain, and it partially explains why it's so much easier. Once you get a concussion, you're almost, like, very few people don't get more. And, like, people like Troy Aikman, they had to retire because they started getting them so frequently. They started doing research into it. Like, there's got to be a reason that it becomes easier to get concussions.
Well, and if you look back at boxing, you look back...
Which, by the way, the only way you'll enjoy Independence Day, just to tie us back into it, multiple times, is if you've had multiple concussions. What were you saying, Dwight?
Well, you look back at the sports, and honestly, when I have a youngin', if I have a son, I don't know if I'm going to encourage them to do that stuff. If they want to, great. But I don't know. Learning what I know about concussions now, it's like,
Yeah, I know.
I was very lucky.
My parents, said they would have stopped me from playing football sooner if they had known the long-term effects of concussion. And that's what's crazy, is the research is only really ramping up now.
Well, research has been going on for a while. It's just that...
Well, I just mean, the public conscious of it.
Yeah.
And the headlining of the story is only become a big deal.
Hey man, when it's a multi-billion-dollar industry,
right? You don't poke that. You don't poke that bear.
You're some guy in some lab. Nope.
Right.
I will take whatever money you're going to hand me to keep my mouth shut.
Right.
We're going to keep going about our business.
Right.
So.
I would say, with some exceptions, a lot of these movies don't have that one crazy scene that just changes your life, and maybe that's part of it. Like Independence Day, watching the White House blow up is fun. Watching these certain things blow up is fun, but because they're a little bit more shallow without that emotional depth, a lot of these don't have that one scene that just really, really resonates with you.
The only thing, the only movie in this that really kind of shifts for me out of that is 300, but that's because 300 has 5 or 6 things that
it does have some iconic scenes, but is it because they were truly
Spartans? What is your profession? I mean,
right.
and
prepare for glory.
And everyone goes, "Aru,"
Right.
And I think part of that too is 300 did capture that dumb male badass note really well,
right?
And so,
if you wear tap out, you that channels you so well.
Ladies and gentlemen, take it from a guy who has actually done MMA. Never wear tap out.
Right.
Please never wear tap out. Just don't.
Right.
Please just don't.
It's like how Vans is a skate company, but most people that wear it don't skate.
Yeah, it's you know how I know
Me
you don't
included,
do?
Nah, I skate.
You know how I know you're not what you claim to be?
Right.
You're wearing tap out. That's how.
Right.
Good
you have
day,
a
sir.
giant sign that says try hard. It's spelled tap out, but it's pronounced try hard.
Yeah, dude, I like it. Those are the best. Okay, great. Awesome.
Oh, man.
Well, we've lost any chance of getting a tap out sponsorship.
By the way, I don't think we shared my sweet diss for New Yorkers on the cast.
No, what was it?
So, by the way, I don't remember why I even thought of this. I think it's probably because New Yorkers are so arrogant most of the time. But if you ever run into a Jets fan, just say, you know how I know you're from New York? And hopefully they'll just say how. Just say, you're proud you can spell a 4-letter word. Because so many Jets fans be like, Jets, Jets. It's congratulations, you can spell a 4-letter word. And there's no even silent syllables in there. Gannett. If you can spell Gannett, good on you. That's hard as far as 4-letter words go. I don't know where I'm going with this anymore, Mike.
Anyways.
Neither did Independence Day. Just keep coming back to that.
Well, since we're going to go into territory that really doesn't have any purpose, we're going to kind of lump Shrek 1 into this, but kind of not really.
Well, I'll stand by Shrek 1. I think it was a unique enough take, and it's got enough classic moments that I stand by Shrek 1. Shrek 2, Shrek 3,
4,
Shrek 4, Shrek 5, Shrek the Halloween special, Shrek the Thanksgiving special.
Shrek seriously cut it out.
Donkey Cupid's Revenge, notwithstanding.
Donkey Mars Invasion 4.
And really, let's just be honest, pretty much any comedy sequel lumps into this. I mean, every once in a while you'll get a rare one like Home Alone 2, which is just instant classic. But more often than not, the comedy sequel, it's just cashing in on the nostalgia factor of the first one. Hangover 2 is a bad offender of this. But really, Hangover 2 was just a very concentrated form of what is wrong with all comedy sequels.
Hangover 2 is what happens when you take the powder that you would mix together, the Gatorade-like drink of the sequel, and you went, you know what? I'm going to put all of it in this one pitcher, and we're going to stir it. And I think it's a good idea because I'm a kid and I think more sugar better. And then I take a drink and go, this is terrible. I'm never doing this again.
Right.
And I dump it out.
I mean, it's just, because I know people that just were so upset by Dumb and Dumber 2. And I enjoyed it. You know why? And I'll never watch it again. But you know why? Because I knew it was going to suck. Like, I went in there, I said, I know what these characters do. They're crude, they're dumb. If I get some laughs out of it, and, you know, I went with friends, then I had a good time. Like, it was worth it to me.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's a reason it took almost a decade and a half to get the sequel made. It's because there wasn't anything there for it.
There was nothing there.
And they're like, okay, we're going to wait until people are begging us for this thing because they don't know what they want. And we're going to give it to them.
Right. Same thing with Anchorman 2. Like, why wait a year or 10 years to come out with that? Like, clearly they weren't inspired. Nobody just gets inspired 10 years later to expand upon a plot that had no plot. You know?
It was just kind of like, cool.
But again, Hangover 2 is another one. I went in expecting it to be mediocre on a good day, and it was mediocre. It had a good first half, fell apart at the end because they were out of ideas.
Yep.
And,
I mean, the whole premise of that movie was let's take every joke we had about Las Vegas and then either make it about Bangkok or Asianness or...
Anchorman 2?
Oh, I'm sorry, Hangover 2.
Yeah.
That we were selling.
Anchorman 2 is like, you know, it's kind of funny because it was riffing on more of the 24-hour news cycle. Like, it really tied into that because, you know, the first one really, if you could call it a period piece, was like making fun of, you know, old news in the 70s.
I mean,
like
it did. It really did nail the very, like, over-the-top, corny kind of just... I have leather-bound books and a curly mustache.
Right, because you wanted to, like, the news guy needed to sound smart, so you trust him. Like, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. But he's just reading teleprompter. So, you know, it tied into that. And then Hankerman 2 at least tied into this is the dangers of a 24-hour news cycle where it all becomes just about, you know, it's all just sensationalism where, like, what grabs their attention, what's over the top and horrifying and just... It became candy. It really did, you know.
You remember that yellow journalism stuff we learned about when we were in journalism school? Yeah, let's do that.
Right.
That stuff.
Let's do that permanently. So it had some interesting angles to attack it with, and then by the end, you go to the big crew versus crew duel, like, standoff, and it just went on too long because they... took what you loved about the first duel standoff between West Mantooth and their, you know, the Channel 2 news and Channel 5
Charlotte Mantooth is a saint.
Right.
You leave her out of this.
Right. I'm going to take her out for a fine lobster dinner, have a great time, and never call her back, or whatever. So, you know, by the end of that, you were just fatigued. You're like, okay, we get it. We loved Anchorman 1. You know we loved Anchorman 1. We all loved Anchorman 1. But...
yeah,
I can respect that. You know, I knew what I was getting in for. If you didn't know that going in, that's your fault. That's not the movie's fault. If you ever go into a comedy sequel expecting it to be as good as the first one and will only enjoy it if it is...
You're not bobbing for Oscars, buddy.
Right.
You're
right. Like, that's on you, okay? That's all I'm saying. That's a personal issue. That's not the director's fault. That's not the producer's fault. That's not the studio's fault.
Yep.
So, I don't know, Mike, do you have anything else to say about that?
Nope, that's pretty much it.
So, the last one we want to touch on, again, this is more of a genre thing, but I will, I'm going to give you a specific example, is the sports genre as a whole, to me, is kind of this way. Now, there are classic, amazing sports movies. Remember the Titans? You can watch that movie a million times. I've watched it a million times. Rocky, like every once in a while, Rudy, you know, you get these classic movies that you can watch again and again and again. For the most part, though, when it comes to sports movies, it's just usually they're feel good movies. You want to see your team win the championship by the end. Every once in a while, you know, they'll put some twist on it where, you know, they lose at the end, like Rocky, I guess. But so,
well, you know what? The best example, honestly, is Any Given Sunday.
Oh, with Jamie Foxx? I don't know if I ever saw that. Wasn't that the one I'm thinking of? Jamie Foxx and Al Pacino?
Yep, Pacino.
I don't know if I've seen that whole movie.
Honestly, the only reason I still remember it was because of that speech he gives. He goes, and those inches are going to make all the difference between winning and losing and living and dying. And then explicative, let's take it. And the whole locker room goes like, legit. Like the locker room
It's playing on a
speech.
trope of every sports movie, but it does it so well that, it stands out. So
It's Al freaking Pacino. The man can fire up a bunch of dead people to cheer.
I mean, don't you just know writers? Like, I guess you don't always know what actors are going to be told after the fact. But directors, when they get Al Pacino, got to be stoked because they're like, I'm just going to let him Pacino around for an hour or so and then get an Oscar nomination.
Yep, pretty much.
But my example was going to be 42. It's something that came out not too long ago, so it might still, you might know what it is. You know what you're getting into with it. You're seeing the Jackie Robinson story, maybe a little bit more in depth than ever before told, whatever. You get an actor that knows what he's doing, that portrays him very well. But you know the story. I mean, it's the same reason, like, I don't get why people love the Titanic so much. Like, I know the story. I know how that ends. You can give me all the fluff you want. BS. Yeah. I don't care. 42, it gave me what I wanted in this case, but the fact that I already knew the whole story, limits it from being a truly great movie. I don't need to go back and get that, but I thoroughly enjoyed it as a baseball fan. As someone who appreciates Jackie Robinson, the impact he had. Great movie to go see.
Well, if you think about it, honestly, there has to be a level of, if it's based on a true story, it has to be anonymous enough to where not everybody knows the outcome.
Right.
Or it has to take a new angle.
Right.
And for sports movies, that's hard. If it's, Secretariat. We know Secretariat won the Triple Crown.
Right.
We know, Muhammad Ali's a little different.
If they had made a miracle about the Soviet team that lost to us, I guess there you go. That's something interesting. But miracles about the Americans, because Americans want to go see about Americans. We don't care about Russians.
Well, you know what? How many people in our generation knew about that?
Nobody.
Well,
once the movie came out,
yeah,
but yeah, it didn't have that same impact for a lot of us. So I don't know. I'd have to talk to an older individual that maybe watched in 1980.
Yeah.
To really know was that a good depiction of it? Was that an enjoyable movie? I don't remember liking Miracle very much.
I remember sympathizing with the hockey players because of the again whistle, again running, because I just had a wrestling practice where we had to do that, and I ran until I vomited twice. So I was like,
twice.
I know
nice.
I know the struggle.
Twice is not nice when it comes to
it was kind of like one of those moments where you look at the screen and go,
twice is not as nice when it comes to vomit, by the way, and once is more than plenty when it comes to vomit.
Yeah,
Zero is the only desirable figure. When it comes
gross out alert for the next 5 seconds. So if you have a queasy stomach, turn down the volume now. I tell you right now, in endurance sports, you learn to puke to make yourself feel better and keep going.
Right. You're like, there is actually an option B to this, or option C. There's
okay, I'm getting this over with, and I'm going back.
There's survive begrudgingly. There's B, die. Or you can vomit and feel mediocre and keep going.
Yeah, pretty much.
Until you have to vomit again.
Okay, you can turn the volume back down.
Where were we again, Mike?
I think, honestly, we're rounding up about sports movies. The problem is, for most of them, they're scripted because it was a real event.
Right.
I know
what I was going to say. After Mighty Ducks, why even make a hockey movie? They've already made the best hockey movie ever. I know that there's some
Ducks fly together. Ducks fly together. We're flapping our wings. You can't see that. Ducks fly together.
Was this in the movie?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Quack. Quack.
Well, they did that too.
Quack. Quack. Quack! It was good enough that they made an NHL team based off of it and then ruined it. Well, and a cartoon. And then they ruined it by taking the Mighty out of the Ducks because Disney no longer owns the Anaheim Ducks. But all that to say,
Disney is stupid powerful. Lest no one, let no one forget that. Lest we forget
right.
and fall prey.
Disney, forgive us. Actually, we're not worthy. So that's pretty much it. What we're getting at is have a fair understanding of what you're going to see. Have fair expectations. A lot of the times, these movies get so hyped from the select few media sources and critics hype these movies up to a point where your expectations get all fudgy.
Yep.
And it's not the fault of the people making the movie. They worked hard. They made a good movie. They're working within the constraints of the studios. They're working in the constraints to the customer, which, by the way, you are not the only customer that this director has. So just because you don't like it, don't always hate on them for reaching the common denominator.
The best vote a consumer can give is their paycheck.
Right.
So say you're disagreeing with us and you're horribly offended that these directors are not meeting their whole potential. Don't watch the movie then.
Right.
I mean, here's the deal. There's
but
telltale
also
signs.
On that note, don't crap on the movie that you didn't go see.
Exactly. And I think that's what cracks me up too. It's like you can't go into a Michael Bay movie expecting something by James Cameron.
Right. Like, yeah, you know the deal. You've known the deal for 20 years now what you're going to do with Michael Bay.
Oh my God, TMNT was so not like the source material.
Don't get mad at Michael Bay, because he's just going to give you the troll face and wipe his nose with the $1 billion he made from Transformers 4.
I laugh because I have a feeling if we ever were yelling at Michael Bay for how terrible a director he is, he goes, yeah, you're adorable. Then why do you morons keep watching my movies?
I mean, we're to blame. Like, Mike, we always give Michael Bay a hard time. But again, if you don't like Michael Bay movies, that's a personal problem. That's a you problem. That's not a Michael Bay problem.
I did not see the TMNT Turtle of my own will.
I did.
Somebody paid for my ticket, and we were going there because he was mourning something bad that had happened, and we needed a distraction. That's what happened.
And then you mourned the death of the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, that's true.
It actually had the counter effect.
Yeah.
That actually wasn't directed by Michael Bay, though. It was just produced and so inspired by Michael Bay that it's unmistakable. TMNT, by the way, has the same climax as Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man 1, where they're battling on the tower, and the tower falls. It was kind of funny. I was like, man, that's really similar.
We need to do a cast at one point in movies with terrible plots. Do you think the writers just went, screw it!
Right.
We're done!
And, the thing is, I hate that TMNT movie, but I do my best not to, really give it a hard time, because if we're being honest, the 80s Ninja Turtles and early 90s Ninja Turtles probably aren't as good as I remember them. I'm biased because I watched it when I was 5, and that's a sacred movie to me.
Watch the Nostalgia Critic commentary on TMNT. It's actually pretty funny. It covers that, because the whole point. Actually, I'm not going to ruin it. Just go watch it.
I argue it's a good. I argue the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is a good movie. And I think it holds up, but...
Well, the comics were a parody.
Right.
It was making fun of...
Daredevil?
Yeah, it was making fun of how dark all these comics were going. You know what? We're going to make this as over the top and wacky and still dark.
Right.
But
yeah, nobody knows... I didn't even know that. The cartoons totally were not dark at all, so it's hard to even...
Oh, yeah. Well, that was why...
To be honest, it was when I was watching the Daredevil show that somebody was like, by the way, Stick? It's what Splinter's based off. Huh? Then, they're like, oh, the Foot Clan? Based off the hand. Oh my gosh, you're right.
Wait a minute.
This is getting weird.
Yup.
So, that's what we have for you guys. Just hopefully take some personal reflection. Be like us. We're trying to be better moviegoers. Trying to be more fair. People work hard on these movies. Even the crappiest movie you think you've ever seen, somebody dedicated a fair chunk of their past year or two to making. And maybe it's because we try to be content creators ourselves. You start to understand, what we're doing with the audio format is piece of cake compared to doing a movie.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not that easy, we've learned.
Well, we don't have producers yelling down our throats to get it done by a deadline.
Right.
And we don't have producers and financial backers saying, no, you can't do that.
Right. Yeah, if you're mad at a movie maker for making compromises, just remember, most of us make compromises in all of our jobs, nobody... Unless you're your own boss, and even then you're still making compromises usually to cater to the market. So, just a little perspective we're trying to give.
Yup.
Again, we'll place a link for the Hardcore History. Definitely worth a check out if you guys find yourselves having some extra time on your hands where you want to be entertained and you want to learn something.
Also, shout out extra credits, which we highlighted in a way.
Which we always highlight.
Yeah, pretty much.
Just shows you, how good of a job those guys do. That they literally apply to so much that we talk about.
They have a history section called Extra History. Check it out. It's a lot of more obscure stuff, and it covers World War One.
We'll link their World War One series.
And John Green, the guy who wrote Fault in Our Stars and yada yada yada, through the Vlog Brother Empire he has on YouTube, does a crash course in history, and he does a better job at being anti-revisionist. So he gets too contrarian sometimes, but Like, he loves the Mongols too, but for the exact, like, he's actually embodies what Dan Carlin, like, tries to fight on talking about their positiveness.
Right.
Actually, I'll have to show it to you later. But,
Okay.
but yeah, so check them out too.
Interesting. Fault in Our Stars guy, who knew? Was a reliable source for history.
Oh yeah.
But there you have it, guys. We should be back sooner than later this time. I know we've said that like the last 2 casts. This time we should make good on that.
Even if we have to chloroform a certain guest and drag him onto
yeah, right. Right, we've been in the works on some guests, and it's just been a crazy couple months just for everybody in our age bracket. I guess that's what happens when you're fresh out of college.
Adulting.
Yeah,
is harder than we
adulting
thought it would be.
hurts. It hurts the soul. And it's non-consensual, but we won't go into that.
Nope. On that happy note, everybody like, comment, subscribe, and as always, thanks for listening.